What's up next is generative AI and using it responsibly. So, unlike the library search and unlike the open web search, generative AI can get you straight to an article, but it can also get you kind of everywhere. It's a little bit confusing to use. Um, so, let's talk about responsible ways to use it and how to do the legwork to ensure it's the correct kind of resource or even a real resource. My disclaimer, and I'm going to say this very firmly, please check with your professor before you ever use any kind of generative AI product. Different professors and different courses will have different rule sets about how much, if any, you're allowed to use. So I do not want to get anybody in trouble. I don't want you to have a plagiarism issue. So please check with your professor, look at your syllabus, see if they mention generative AI before you try to use it. But if you do have a green light to use it in any capacity, here's what you need to know. Generative AI works by predicting the answer to your question by looking at vast swaths of training data. Depending on the generative AI model you choose. If you choose ChatGPT or DeepSeek, they use different sets of training data. What is the training data? They won't tell you that. They say it's proprietary. So, it's safe to say they cannot use copyrighted content in their training data. Academic journals fall into that category. So generative AI cannot get behind a paywall to use scholarly sources to provide the answers to your queries. That's something to keep in mind. I tell you that because for a lot of people who use generative AI, the way that it produces an answer is kind of a mystery. That's how. It's predicting an answer based on patterns in its training data. Its training data matters. We frequently don't know what the training data is. Second thing to think about, what is this source? A lot of them will cite sources, and they'll even hyperlink you to the source that they use. So when you get to that source, and you do need to go to the sources to double check to make sure that they were used appropriately, then you have to do the legwork of looking it up to see, is this from a peer-reviewed journal? Like I said, most of those are behind paywalls. So it's not super likely that generative AI will produce a scholarly source as one of its resources. But some journals are open access, like the ones that we just saw on Google Scholar that had PDFs online. So it's not, so black and white that way. So find out, is the journal peer-reviewed? Google the name of the journal, and then you can even add Wikipedia at the end of that search, and it will tell you, what's the peer review process or what's the process for publication. Ask yourself, is this a primary source? We still need that criteria checked off as well. And the date, 5 to 10 years. And then the final question, does it exist? Is also very important. ChatGPT is kind of the worst at what's called hallucinating resources, meaning it will sound extraordinarily authoritative and give you an answer and cite a source, and the source just does not exist. If you go looking for the article, it doesn't exist. They'll pull real names of scientists, nurses, scholars who've published real articles, and they will make up an article and attribute it to that person. So if you are going to use generative AI to find sources, make sure it's a real source and they really wrote it. See if you can find full text. Take the article title, bring it back to the library search and search for it. Search for it on Google Scholar. See if you can actually find it. And then as far as like use of generative AI, asking the right question is really imperative. So when you're asking generative AI for answers, ask one question at a time and make that question as clear as possible. You can ask it your full Pico question if you like. Just make sure you do the legwork to make sure the sources are real and meet the criteria. But do ask targeted questions. Questions that have multiple variables get really confusing and mix up the prediction of results. Or just ask the same question a different way and see if you get a different answer. And then finally, cite what you use. You can cite generative AI just like any other source, and you should. We want to provide attribution for ideas that are not completely and wholly ours. So if you use any kind of AI, whether that's to get sources, you'll want to disclose that. If you use something that AI gave you as a quote, you'll want to cite that just like you would any other source. So those are my pro tips for generative AI. That being said, we did develop an AI tool to help you find sources. It was developed in-house at Maryville between me and my partner in DLX. It was developed on the same platform as social learning companions. If you have any of those in any of your coursework, those are bots that you can talk to that are trained on your course materials. We have one for the library as well. You can also access it from your research guide. This tab at the bottom will take you to our AI search companion. The rules apply here too. So our bot is trained on library search criteria. So I worked with my partner to train this bot to create a search string with the ands and ors and things out of a plain Pico question or just a request. So I'm going to type in my Pico question, or I'll actually say I need peer-reviewed articles about the effects of exercise on adults with hypertension. We'll even say the articles should be less than 5 years old. The library assistant will think, and then it should return a link to the results for that search, including the criteria about it being peer-reviewed and the criteria about the age of the article. So it says, got it, here's a link. If I click on that link, if everything went well, we'll get a text search for exercise and hypertension in adults. And it's gone ahead and put on the filters for academic journal and the date range. So if you want to use ChatGPT for all kinds of things, I appreciate it. If you'd like to use our library search companion, it is Maryville specific, it is our library specific, and it will generate a link to the results. So I highly encourage you to try that out. It is relatively new and we're still adding to it all the time. So just know that it also isn't perfect. It can be fallible as well. But the goal is that it will do exactly this, which is take your real question, the full question that Discovery Search cannot parse on its own, and turn it into a really tight search so that you can just kind of skip to the shopping part instead of applying all of the filters.